You have 24 hours to pay $48,000 or you need to vacate. My sister slid the invoice across the counter before I even took off my funeral dress. It wasn't a condolence card, it was a bill for retroactive rent covering the 5 years I spent nursing our dying father while she was busy building her career. "I'm listing the property on Monday," Bryn said, checking her diamond watch without a shred of emotion. She was charging me for the privilege of watching him die so she didn't have to. Before I tell you exactly what I dug out of her trash can that ended her career, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I turned my back on my sister, walked into my father's study, and locked the heavy oak door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was the only answer she was going to get. Bryn thought she was dealing with a grieving daughter who had spent the last few years measuring out morphine doses and changing bedsheets. She saw a pushover. She forgot that before I was a caretaker, I was Spencer, a 29-year-old senior forensic auditor. I spent my 20s tracking hidden assets for divorce lawyers and the federal government. Bryn might know how to run a beauty empire into the ground, but I know how to follow the money. I sat at my father's mahogany desk and opened my laptop. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady, moving with the muscle memory of 1,000 audits. I navigated to the family trust portal. I typed in the password my father had whispered to me 3 months ago, back when he could still speak clearly. Access denied. Of course, Bryn wasn't stupid. She had called the bank and reset the credentials the moment the coroner's van pulled away. She thought that was checkmate. But Bryn is the kind of person who uses the same password for her Instagram as she does for her banking, and she is too arrogant to understand how security protocols work. She had changed the password, but she wouldn't have known how to disable the two-factor authentication linked to a physical device. I needed that code. I needed the one device my father always kept near him. I stood up and scanned the room, but the desk was bare. Then I remembered the noise in the hallway earlier, the sound of her tossing junk into a pile for the estate sale. I unlocked the door and slipped into the corridor. It looked like a landfill. My father's clothes, his books, his life, all heaped in garbage bags. I dug through the pile, ignoring the tightness in my chest as I shoved aside his favorite cardigan. Then I found it, his old iPad face down under a stack of magazines. The screen was cracked, spiderweb thin across the corner. I pressed the home button. Nothing. The battery was dead. I ran back into the study and rummaged through the drawers until I found a charging cable. I plugged it in and stared at the empty black screen, holding my breath. If this didn't turn on, I was just a homeless girl with a laptop. A minute passed, then 2. The red battery icon finally flickered onto the screen. I waited, watching the percentage tick up. 1%, 2%. Ding! I hit resend code on my laptop. The iPad lit up. Your verification code is 4920. I typed it in. The dashboard loaded, and the truth laid itself out in neat digital rows. I saw the balance, and right below it I saw the pending transaction. Bryn had set up a transfer of $450,000 to a shell company called Lumina Ventures. It was queued to clear in 48 hours. My instinct was to hit cancel. I could stop it right now. I could freeze the account, call the bank, and start a civil war. But that's what a sister would do. An auditor knows better. If I stopped the transfer, it was just a family dispute over an inheritance, a civil matter. But if I let her send it, if I let her move that money across state lines into a fraudulent account while I held the power of attorney, that is wire fraud. That is a federal crime. I didn't cancel the transfer. Instead, I opened a new tab and navigated to the FinCEN portal. I started drafting a suspicious activity report. I filled in the account numbers, the amounts, and the beneficiary details. I wasn't going to save her from herself. I was going to let her put the handcuffs on her own wrists. I saved the draft, ready to launch the moment she made her move. The movers didn't knock. They pounded on the heavy oak door at 7 in the morning, a rhythmic thudding that vibrated through the floorboards I had spent the last 5 years pacing. Bryn stood in the foyer, sipping a latte, pointing at my life like it was debris she needed to clear from a construction site. "Take the guest room first," she instructed the crew foreman. "Anything in cardboard boxes goes to the curb. Anything that looks valuable stays." She didn't look at me. To her, I was just another tenant she was evicting, a squatter who had overstayed her welcome the second our father's heart stopped beating. I went upstairs and started folding the few clothes I hadn't already packed. My room wasn't really a bedroom, it was a glorified storage closet next to Dad's suite, chosen because I could hear him if he coughed in the middle of the night. As I stripped the sheets off the narrow cot, the smell of the house hit me. Not the lemon polish Bryn's cleaning crew had used yesterday, but the underlying scent of sickness, antiseptic, old paper, and the metallic tang of oxygen tanks. For 5 years, this smell had been my entire world. Bryn liked to tell her friends that I was finding myself during my 20s. She painted a picture of a wayward sister crashing at Dad's place because she couldn't hold down a job. The truth was, in the bank statements I had downloaded the night before, when Dad got sick, his insurance covered 40% of the home care. Bryn refused to chip in for the rest. She said her liquidity was tied up in inventory, so I liquidated my 401k. I drained the savings I had built auditing tech firms. I spent $80,000 of my own money on nurses, medication, and the specialized bed she was now trying to sell for a profit. I remembered the night the doctor told us it was terminal. I was holding Dad's hand, trying to memorize the lines on his palm. Bryn was in Cabo. She didn't fly back. She sent a text saying she was too empathetic to see him like that her spirit was too fragile to handle the negative energy of a hospice environment. She posted a photo of a sunset that night with the caption, "Healing." I was changing adult diapers and learning how to adjust morphine drips while she was protecting her peace on a beach. I walked past her on my way out, carrying the single box that contained my entire life here. She wrinkled her nose, stepping back as if my grief was contagious. "Make sure you leave the keys on the counter," she said, scrolling through her phone. "And Spencer, don't make a scene when you leave. The neighbors are watching." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she didn't see a sister, she saw a balance sheet liability. She thought she was kicking out a leech who had lived rent-free in a multi-million-dollar brownstone. She didn't realize that the rent she tried to charge me yesterday had already been paid in blood, sleepless nights, and a career I put on hold to save the man she ignored. She thought she was winning because she held the deed. She didn't know I was walking out of that house with the one thing that was going to destroy her, the truth about where the money actually went. I walked into the living room for one last look, not at the house, but at the fireplace mantel. That was where the urn sat. It wasn't an expensive piece, just a simple brushed brass vessel that Dad had picked out himself 3 years ago, joking that he didn't want to be showy in the afterlife. It was the only thing I had explicitly asked for in the settlement emails. I didn't care about the furniture or the art, I just wanted him. The mantel was bare, not just bare, scrubbed clean. A generic abstract painting now hung where his portrait used to be, and a vase of white lilies stood in the center, perfectly symmetrical, perfectly soulless. I found Bryn in the sunroom. She was directing a staging assistant on the proper angle for a throw pillow. "Bryn," I said, my voice sounding calm even to my own ears, "where is the urn?" She didn't turn around. She just waved a hand vaguely toward the front of the house. "I had to clear the surfaces, Spencer. The realtor said personal items make it harder for buyers to visualize themselves living here. It's Psychology 101. "I didn't ask about the psychology," I said, stepping closer. "I asked where our father is." Bryn finally turned. She looked annoyed, like I had interrupted a crucial business meeting to ask about a missing sock. "It was morbid," she said, smoothing the front of her silk blouse. "A heavy metal pot full of ash sitting right there in the focal point of the room. It didn't fit the aesthetic. It was clutter." "Clutter," I repeated. The word tasted like metal. Yes, clutter, so I got rid of it. My eyes darted to the boxes in the hallway. Which box is he in? Bryn laughed, a short, sharp sound. He's not in a box, Spencer. I tossed it. This morning. She pointed a manicured finger toward the large bay window that overlooked the street. I looked out just in time to see the city's sanitation truck rumbling away from the curb. The mechanical whine of the compactor echoed through the glass, a grinding, crushing sound that vibrated in my teeth. I watched the truck turn the corner, carrying the remains of the man who had taught Bryn how to ride a bike, the man who had co-signed her first business loan, the man I had held while he took his last breath. I stood there for a long moment. The logical part of my brain, the auditor part, knew that ashes are just carbon and bone fragments, but the daughter in me felt something snap. It wasn't a break, it was a calcification. Up until this moment, I had been operating on a sense of justice. I wanted to stop her from stealing. I wanted to protect the estate. But as I watched that truck disappear, the goalposts shifted. This wasn't a legal dispute anymore. It wasn't a civil disagreement over assets. This was a war for dignity. Bryn was already turning back to the staging assistant. "Let's try the blue vase instead. She said the white is washing out the room." She thought she had won. She thought that by throwing away his ashes, she had erased him, and by kicking me out, she had erased me. She didn't realize that she had just removed the only thing holding me back. I wasn't just going to report her to the authorities. I wasn't just going to file paperwork. I was going to look her in the eye when her world fell apart. I adjusted the strap of my laptop bag on my shoulder. It felt heavier now, weighted down, not just by the evidence of her fraud, but by the absolute necessity of her destruction. "Goodbye, Bryn," I said. She didn't answer. She was too busy adjusting the lighting for a house she no longer owned. I arrived at the financial district 40 minutes early. I needed that time. I needed to compose myself, to put the armor back on. I was wearing my only good suit, a navy blue number I usually reserved for federal audits, and heels that clicked with authority on the pavement. I wasn't going into that meeting as a grieving daughter. I was going in as a professional who knew exactly where the bodies were buried. I turned the corner toward Vanguard Law, rehearsing the confrontation in my head. That's when I saw him. A block away from the entrance, a construction crew had left a trench open, surrounded by orange cones but poorly secured. An elderly man in a wheelchair had tried to navigate the narrow plywood ramp, but a wheel had slipped. He was stuck. One side of his chair sunk deep into the wet, clay-heavy mud. People were walking past him. Businessmen in $3,000 suits stepped around the scene like he was a traffic cone, their eyes fixed on their phones, terrified that acknowledging him might cost them 30 seconds of their day. I checked my watch. I had 30 minutes. If I stopped, I risked being late. If I stepped into the mud, I risked ruining the image of competence I needed to project to Bryn. But then I thought about the urn in the trash. I thought about the way Bryn looked at clutter. To the people walking by, this man was clutter. I didn't think. I stepped over the caution tape. The mud sucked at my heels, immediately coating the leather in thick, gray sludge. "Don't move," I said, dropping my laptop bag on the dry concrete. "I've got you." The man looked up. His eyes were sharp and intelligent, but his hands were shaking as he gripped the armrests. "You're ruining your shoes, miss. You look like you're heading somewhere important." "I am," I grunted, getting a grip on the metal frame. "But shoes are depreciating assets. People aren't." I heaved. It took everything I had to dislodge the wheel from the suction of the clay. My skirt was splattered, my hands were filthy, but with one final pull, I got him back onto the plywood and up to the sidewalk. I grabbed a tissue from my purse and tried to wipe the worst of the mud off my hands. The man watched me, studying my face with an intensity that felt familiar. It was the way a judge looks at a defendant. "Thank you," he said. He adjusted his own suit jacket, which was immaculate, despite the near accident. Most people wouldn't have stopped. They calculate the cost of the interruption and decide it's not worth the return on investment. I know people like that, I said, picking up my bag. I'm related to one. He glanced at the building I was staring at, the steel and glass tower of Vanguard Law. Then he looked at the folder tucked under my arm. You're going to Vanguard, unfortunately. Are you seeing Caldwell? I froze. How did you know? His expression hardened. The frailty vanished, replaced by a steeliness that made me want to straighten my spine. Because Caldwell is the kind of lawyer who thrives on chaos, and you look like someone walking into a war zone. He wheeled himself closer. My name is Warren, and I have a history with that firm. I hesitated. I didn't have time for a conversation. I have to go, Warren. My sister is waiting to strip me of my inheritance. Then let me come with you. I blinked. What? I'm not just an old man stuck in the mud, he said quietly. I'm the chair of the State Bar Disciplinary Board. I've been building a file on Caldwell for 6 months. I've watched men like him destroy lives because the legal system is too slow to stop them. It's the cost of silence. Good people see the rot, but they don't intervene because it's not their case, not their problem. I'm done being silent. If you're walking into a room with Caldwell, you need a witness, and I need to see him in action. I looked at this man, mud on his wheels, fire in his eyes, and I realized this wasn't a coincidence. It was ammunition. Bryn wanted to see me broken. Fine, I'd walk in covered in mud with a beggar in tow. I'd feed her arrogance until she choked on it. Okay, I said, let's go. The Vanguard Law conference room was a sterile glass box in the clouds. When Warren and I entered, Bryn and Caldwell were already waiting. Caldwell looked like every corporate predator in a tailored suit. Bryn looked flawless, too flawless. They stared at the dried mud on my shoes, then at Warren in his wheelchair, his suit still streaked with clay. Bryn waved a hand. You smell awful. And who is this? Did you pick up a stray? This is a legal meeting, Caldwell smirked. Want security to escort him out? He's a witness, I said softly, gripping the chair. I didn't want to come alone. Fine, Bryn sighed. Put him in the corner. I shrank into my seat, trembling on purpose. Predators drop their guard when they think you're beaten. Caldwell slid over a contract. Sign the waiver, $5,000. You give up any claim to the estate. Considering what? I whispered. Considering you're broke, Bryn snapped. I let tears rise. What about Dad? The DNR order. The doctor said he could recover. Caldwell stiffened. Medical issues aren't relevant. He was taking too long, Bryn cut in. To die? I hissed. She leaned back. I needed the estate. I have a $500,000 balloon payment due Friday. If I didn't get liquidity, I'd be in federal prison for embezzlement. She leaned back. So yes, I signed it. Now sign the waiver. Caldwell looked sick. My phone blinked red beside the contract. I can't, I said calmly. Why not? Because I don't deal with murderers. I tapped the screen. Her recorded voice echoed through the room. Caldwell shoved back his chair. I wasn't party to that. I'm here for estate settlement only. Bryn laughed. You think that matters? I'll be on a non-extradition island before anyone hears it. She spun her laptop. I didn't sell the brownstone. I leveraged it. Hard money loan. They wired me $1.8 million an hour ago. House is theirs unless you pay $2 million. She pulled out her phone now. Excuse me. Go ahead, I said. She hesitated. What? Send it. Smiling, she hit confirm transfer. The screen flashed red. She froze. Why is it declining? Caldwell squinted. That's not a decline. That's an administrative lock. I opened my laptop. Check your email. Account frozen. Federal investigation pending. I filed a suspicious activity report 3 days ago. I said they were waiting for a trigger. Wiring estate proceeds to an offshore shell company. That's money laundering. You just confirmed it for the FBI. Her phone dropped onto the marble. Warren rolled forward, his voice sharpened. Caldwell, explain to the state bar why you facilitated a fraudulent loan. Caldwell stared. Chairman, Warren. That's correct. Caldwell bolted upright. I didn't know about the DNR. I'll testify. I want immunity. Bryn lunged for me. Then the door slid open. Agents entered. As they cuffed her, she screamed, You ruined everything! The clicks of the cuffs answered for me. 3 weeks later, the loan was voided. The house returned to the trust, then to me. I tracked the sanitation trucks myself, dug through intake lines in Queens. The urn was scratched but sealed. Back on the mantel, the house finally smelled like dust and lemon oil instead of fear. I sat in my father's chair. No empire, no offshore accounts, just my home, my dignity, and the debt finally paid.